My name is Jon Williams, and joining me now, as I said yesterday, is the wonderful Mr. Mike Downie. How are you, sir?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Great, thank you. Now, I'm really, really thankful that you've given us the time to come in today, because I know that there's not too many interviews that you do. We're touching really on the Downie Wenjack Fund Night at the Victoria Royals game tonight with the Seattle Thunderbirds in town.
You know, we're so moved by all the work that's been done by the Royals to help us in what we're doing, which is, you know, try to make Canadians more aware of not just residential schools, but I think the need for each of us to move in the direction of reconciliation.
For me, I was most excited to just learn from you and just to absorb knowledge. So I'd like to go back as far as you can contextually with where this came about. Mm-hmm. So what drew you particularly to a certain subject matter that then led to this situation with the Wenjack Fund?
Well, John, it really goes back 5 years. I was driving in my car in my neighborhood in Toronto, and I heard a radio documentary about a little boy who'd run away from a residential school in 1966 and was trying to walk home 600 kilometers along the railway tracks. That hit me over the head, that image. I had my son Will was 12 at the time, but also that I knew really almost nothing about residential schools. And over lunch, I told Gord I had this incredible article that Ian Adams had written for Maclean's magazine the following year, 1967, called The Lonely Death of Charlie Wenjack. And I shared that with Gord, and I told him, you know, we should try to tell the story. We'd been talking about creating a film production company, and I said, this maybe should be the first one that we try to do. And over lunch, we decided we were going to try to tell this story. The next thing, Gord had written these 10 poems, and then Kevin Drew from Broken Social Scene reached out and said, I always wanted to make a record with you, Gord. Do you have anything? And Gord thought, no, I don't, Kevin. I'd love to make a record with you. And then something in the back of his mind said, wait a minute, what about those 10 poems? So then there was a record, and then we went to Jeff Lemire, the great graphic novelist, and he took Gord's and Kevin and Dave Hamlin's record, and he turned that into a graphic novel. But every time we kind of would stall out and not really have an idea of how we were going to get to the next station, somebody would come along, like Kevin Drew or Jeff Lemire, or Justin Stevenson, who was the one who did the animations that put the music and those graphic images together. I kind of think, you know, for a lot of Canadians, we're kind of hoping that the genius of individuals will come forward and say, you know, I like what these guys did. These guys understand hockey. They understand how to get, you know, the message out inside an arena. So that's what they did, you know, just kind of a quiet act. And I think that's what it's going to take over a long time. You know, these small, quiet acts, people sticking to what they know, but trying to figure out a way, is there a way I can do this that sort of either involves Indigenous or has an outcome that improves Indigenous lives? We want to help plant these seeds. Yeah. At the fund, we give out these micro grants, we call them. It's sort of up to $10,000, and it's individuals who've come up or groups that have you know, found an Indigenous partner and have come up with an idea of something that they think will, you know, move the needle. So we're finding minor hockey teams like in Oakville, Ontario, who brought a team from Attawapiskat, a team of 12-year-olds down to Oakville to spend time together and play hockey together, not against each other, but together. You know, you start adding things like that together, and the cumulative effect, I think, will be really dramatic. Gord always thought the national identity in this country, something he knew a little bit about, having written songs about the different parts of this country and the different people that helped shape this country. He always felt that the national identity was missing a little something. And I think over the last 5 years, he kind of finally figured out what that piece was. And it's right under our nose. It's the fact that people have been living here for, well, in this part of the country, 15,000 years. And somehow we haven't really, you know, brought that into our sense of who we are. I think there's an opportunity to do just that in the coming, well, let's say 100 years.
How did you bring together all this information to then put together the secret path? Was it difficult to find information on it?
There had been a medical inquiry into Chanie's death. And that was prompted, or that's where Ian Adams heard about the story of a little boy dying along the tracks. So there was actually quite a bit of information about this particular story. Yeah. There was a song done by Willie Dunn in the 70s. I mean, so it was kind of out there on the margins, this story of this little boy. Gord, being a very industrious guy, of course, starts going through it all. And when you look at those poems, they are in first person. They're coming from he wrote them to sound like maybe what the way a 12-year-old would sort of communicate with the world or even just with themselves. And I think Gord kind of internalized that and then did what an artist, does, which is take us all maybe on a little bit of a journey and show us things that we otherwise couldn't see. And I think that's what art does at its purest form. It opens our eyes, it opens our minds, and it opens our heart. I think there's an opportunity for this country, and this is what Gord believed. I think there's a chance to, not just look at all the things that have gone wrong, all the things that have happened over the last 150 years and try to figure out the blame and try to figure out, what went wrong. I think the opportunity is actually to look at ourselves in a new way. And I think, as Canadians, we spend a lot of time saying what we're not. I think there's an opportunity to maybe talk about what we could be. And I think what we could be is a really inclusive country that figured out what we had done wrong and then sort of committed ourselves to trying to not only own that, but also build on that. These kind of opportunities don't offer themselves up to every country in the world, to have this kind of incredible culture that's right here under our nose that we don't really know too much about.
Yeah.
As Gord said, trained to ignore. I think that we'd just be foolish not to sort of take a look at it and say, what can we learn? I mean, you learn something in a few thousand years. What can we learn? What can we bring into our lives today? And, it's not a radical change, but it's a really interesting one.
Just as eloquent as speaking to Gord. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much. You two fascinate me, and such a pleasure to finally meet you. Have fun at the
Jon.
Royals tonight.
Thank you very much, Jon.
The Zone at 91.3.